Disclaimer. It's never a good idea to review a game in its beta state. With that being said, why am I reviewing Titanfall in its beta state? Well, for two reasons. And before you call me an idiot, hear me out. Number one, this is a multiplayer shooter, and number two, I've ran into literally one bug through my 6 or 7 hours of playtime. So to compensate for my hypocrisy, there will be no final score in this review. This is what I would have said if this game was still in beta, and oddly enough, the game feels like it's still in beta. Hell, there's even a beta for the private match function, something that should have been there and done perfectly on the game's release. That will affect the score, by the way. This game is disappointing for three major reasons. Number one, its price tag. Number two, its content, or lack thereof. And number three, its wasted potential. Now, before I get to complaining, which I will do a lot of, let me give you some background and tell you what's good about the game. With this being said, and before I get to anything, I have to comment on the graphical fidelity of this game. This game on ultra settings looks like a high-res PC title from 2001, which is why I was surprised the game ran like crap on my rig, which also led to my surprise that this game runs on the Valve Source engine. I don't have that good of a PC by any means, but even I can run any Source game on Macs flawlessly. As you can tell by the above example, this obviously isn't even close to max settings. I will say that I can run Battlefield 4 on ultra settings in 720p with an Nvidia GTX 250, which in computer time is freaking ancient at this point, so I'm assuming it's a driver issue, and if not, when coupled with the complaints I'm about to present, it looks like the PC version got screwed on this one. Aside from the graphics, the game itself has an overwhelming amount of hype backing it up. This game is developed by Respawn Entertainment, which is comprised of a small group of people who were fired from the original Infinity War in 2009. About 4.5 years later, the Xbox One, which is a stupid name for a game console by the way, had its own show at E3 where they showed off Titanfall, a Call of Duty looking multiplayer mech combat shooter. The game's mechanics will look complicated on the screen, however stunts like parkour while running are easy to pull off with the simple press of 2 buttons. That's not to say that it can't get annoying whenever parkour results in you getting stuck in a window, killing the whole vibe of the fast pace, but it doesn't matter because you'll start off the game with a tutorial, which, thank God, the game does give you an option to skip. Once you get into a match, the game will start with you and your squad mates dropping from an airship onto the battlefield, and the loading screens give context to each game. For example, one map will tell you that the resources have been ravaged by an enemy team, resulting in the attrition match you're about to engage in. And more context is added at the end, where if you win, you'll have to shoot down an enemy airship, or if you lose, you have to escape in an airship where you'll be transported into space. There are 4 main game modes available: Attrition, Capture the Flag, Hardpoint, and Last Man Standing. Attrition is basically a game centered around eliminating every player, bot, or titan on the map. Hardpoint, well, if you don't know what that is, then seek some help. Capture the Flag, well, if you don't know what that is, you need some help. Last Man Standing is where you immediately spawn in your titan, and the object of the game is to prevent your titan from being eradicated. In my very humble personal opinion, it's better like that. Now, this would leave any Titanfall virgin to make the very strong argument that the game modes are generic, and while they're right to an extent, that complaint makes it abundantly clear that they have never played the game. The gameplay itself is broken down into 2 player functions, the first being ground combat where you play as a pilot, and the second being mech combat where you play as a titan. Immediately the ground combat is less satisfying, and if you couldn't guess what it was that made it less satisfying, it was the bots. Now, the difference between the bots in this game and the bots in games like Call of Duty is that the bots in Titanfall are solely meant to direct, divert, and redirect the flow of battle, constantly keeping pace. But even I, someone who is absolute garbage at most multiplayer shooters, thought the bots were insultingly easy. It's downright captivating when I walk around an enemy bot and look into its eyes as it looks into mine and not get shot once. There could have been, at the very least, light challenge. You'll find that you'll spend most of your attrition matches racking up points by killing nothing but bots and still taking the top player spot. Titan gameplay is first rocketed off by the moment you call down your mech. This can be affected by wildcards, which I'll talk about later, or how many ground kills you get at the very beginning of the game. When you call your mech, you jump into it, and depending on your class setup, which is extremely tedious to unlock, and I'll get to why later, you'll carry a machine gun, rocket launcher, or rocket launcher machine gun. The Titan suit itself is fun for gameplay. You'll be alerted whenever enemies are nearby in your presence, or when you're being swarmed. This adds a good sense of realism to the game, and it makes it immersive. There are 15 maps with 3 content packs that are scheduled to release in 2014. I should mention that there is some inequity to Titanfall's gameplay. On certain maps there are giant turrets that can be captured or destroyed by inserting your knife into its computer slot. Your knife will serve as a USB device that you can use to hack the turret. You can also snap the necks of your enemies as opposed to just knifing them. You can also kick them and punch them. The maps are varied and they're interesting to play on, especially seeing as how each loading screen gives some type of background. Maps will have different environmental features. For example, one map will have earthquakes and hostile animals to defeat other pilots, and while another may have zip lines, and it is truly fascinating. There is decent customization. Aside from the weapons, which I'll get to later, you'll have tactical abilities, like Electric Smoke, Vortex Shield, and Particle Wall, which can be installed on a Titan, while Cloak, Stim, and Active Radar Pulse are equipped by the pilots. Stim, being the only ability that doesn't give away what it does by its very name, basically makes you run faster, which I will admit makes the parkour extremely fun. You have special weapons in the game called anti-Titan weapons. Things like the Sidewinder weapon, which throws bulbous magnetic grenades out in missile form, and they stick onto a Titan. This causes extreme damage, and there are many variants of these weapons. And if you're feeling douchey, you can have fun by killing pilots with them. You also have tactical ordnances, which are basically grenades. You can throw a grenade that stuns your enemy, smokes them out, or downright blows them up. I find that the stun grenade is more satisfying as it kills pilots in 2 hits and it affects Titans. Finally, you also need to customize your gender. Now, I suppose that's cool for those who want it, but I feel like it's useless. And I'm not saying I care about gender-based dominance in games, but neither gender play a huge part in the game, so screw it, right? The final thing, wildcards. Wildcards are perk-esque special abilities you can call on at the beginning of the match or after you die. You can equip 3 at a time, and you unlock them by simply playing the game. They're extremely fun and addicting to play with, and which I give all the credit to Respawn Entertainment for doing. It's balanced. The game as a whole is balanced perfectly, even with the EVA8 shotgun, which is ubiquitously used by the way, is balanced to some degree. Although I'm sure trolls and hackers will find their way into the system as they already have. Now that I've spoken most of my praises, it's time to rip this game to shreds based off organized questions and answers. Number 1. Why is there a 50 GB install on the PC? The simple answer is that EA forced the game too early. The complicated answer is that EA forced the game too early and they didn't have time to compress the audio files. 15 GB of the install is the game itself, while the other 35 GB are sound files. This is ridiculous. Number 2. Why is there a campaign, or lack thereof? Simple answer, the campaign is barely even there. The complicated answer, the campaign is bare bones barely even there. The game should be ashamed to even include such a feature. There are literally short multiplayer matches with cutscenes at the beginning. As a direct result, the campaign is 2 hours in length each, and it feels like a chore. You have to play through a second time so you can unlock all the Titan class chassis. Remember when I said that Titan chassis are tedious to get? That's because the campaign sucks. And it's really disgraceful when you look at games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Borderlands, Halo, Killzone, and Metro, Half-Life, and so many other games that put hard work into their campaigns, regardless of whether or not they turn out good in the end. And the world has so much depth in characters, and in Titanfall the set pieces are beautiful and the lore is interesting. This is a good example of wasted potential. Number 3. Microtransactions. The simple answer, I don't know. The complicated answer, it's EA. What do you expect? I wrote a review for Dead Space 3 a few months ago, and I didn't have a chance to make it because my capture card broke. But in it, I wrote, any game that you have to pay for that has microtransactions will not receive a perfect score, even if it's excellent. Number 4, the lack of weapon customization. The simple answer, the complicated answer, why is it that Modern Warfare 2 had extensive customization in 2009, and this game in 2014 has 23 weapons total with 3 attachments for all of them. They didn't even have the decency to throw in camos, which are usually tedious to get in a lot of games. And number 5, the servers, at least on PC, are garbage. The simple answer, it looks like the PC version got screwed on this one. The complicated answer, the Xbox One got special treatment. And I recently posted a gameplay video on this channel, which will be linked in the description by the way, so you can see 3 consecutive times with no jump cuts where the server buffered. This happens regularly, and I've gotten plenty of messages from my friends and plenty of complaints from people in various lobbies. I realize I didn't complain that much, or maybe I did, but those are really huge glaring omissions. The install size and embarrassing campaign are 2 especially major offenses. That's it. I realize I sound like I've been doing nothing but complaining for the entirety of this review, probably because I screamed a lot in that last part, but you have to understand that Titanfall is extremely overrated. It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's damn addicting. But the obscene install size, the wasted potential for a good campaign, and the overprice on this game changes the verdict drastically. Maybe if this game was $15 to $25, I would have rated it higher, but what you see on the screen is what I feel it deserves. So, Titanfall purists can bite me, and I can fruitfully say that Titanfall is one of the most disappointing, overhyped games of the year. Then again, I'm sure I should have known better than to trust IGN when they said believe the hype.